All right, we're recording. We're live.
All right, here we go. Welcome back to the BuzzPod. I'm your host, Nico Blatchman, and today we are switching it up a little bit. We had our first ever retired player come on the pod in Jeff Lavecchio 2 episodes ago, and now we're mixing it up even more with definitely our most educational episode coming right now. Joining us today is someone I've learned a ton from, and I know everyone tuning in will as well. He has a degree in exercise physiology, a minor in psychology, and a master's degree student for exercise physiology and nutrition. Holy fuck, that's a lot. If we're talking, this guy's up there on my list of best brains for sure. Andres Preschel, welcome to the pod.
Hey man, what an honor to be here, bro. And I think you should include that, dude. We've known each other like our whole lives almost.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to talk about that right now. So I actually grew up with Andres. We went to the same elementary school and middle school, pretty much 9 years together. And look what he turned out to be, just an absolute genius. So I'm lucky enough to grow up with guys like this. And, he's coming on my hockey podcast, and he's going to bring now a lot of information for everyone tuning in that will benefit you guys, all hockey players and stuff, with some life hacks and just some stuff that you can incorporate into your life and game day.
Backed by science.
Exactly. Backed by science, baby. So this is all facts right here by Andres Preschel. So
what's cool, man, is we totally did different things. We took different routes with our lives, but it kind of goes full circle. Like you went in the direction of, you're being an athlete, and now I'm studying what it takes to be an athlete from the biology and the physiology of being an athlete, psychology of being an athlete. So now we can kind of, we took these separate paths, but now we kind of come together and make something great, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who don't know, I have a fitness page, Nico Blatchman Fitness, and Andres is on Instagram, Andres Preschel, and he's actually been helping me create a program now that I'm creating for hockey players, using kind of science, pretty much backed by science, and getting away from the old traditional lifting and stuff that us hockey players have been doing pretty much forever. So the first thing I want to get into with you, Andres, is pretty much life hacks, because I follow you on Instagram and you're very active and very informational, and I see that you have a lot of life hacks. And when I say life hacks, I mean stuff like, when to sleep, how much sleep to get, how to eat, when to eat, how much to eat, all these things. And even some more specific ones, like I see you taping your mouth sometimes to only breathe through your nose. Can you elaborate on some of these life hacks? And like, when I see things like this that can just better yourself that people don't know about, it's just like, man, how is this stuff not more out there?
Yeah.
And the reason why I think it's not more out there is because people are so stuck on their traditional ways and their habits that they've had their whole lives, that they're not down to incorporate this new modern technology,
right,
that could really benefit them.
Right. Yeah. So one big thing for me is I'm a big believer in that the science of human performance, disease prevention, and longevity should be as accessible as possible. So it should be as easy as possible to get access to the information, but also to understand it, because I feel like the majority of the scientific research, there's new research coming out every single day that you can apply to better your life, but it's sort of limited to that scientific community because it's all like research based. It's so scientific that
Right.
the majority of people can't benefit from it. But the reality is that it's out there for you to take and better yourself. So what I like to do is I like to take that very complicated scientific research and I like to accommodate it for the average person. And so there are a lot of like little hacks. But when I say hacks, I'm really all about understanding the physiology, having a better understanding of your physiology so that you can make more independent, healthy decisions. You are in charge of what's going on in your body. But the word hacks, like, to me, it's a great word and it's sexy and it's appealing to people. But I just want to go ahead and say that I like having like a little bit of a like, let's say, a genuine understanding of even basic concepts regarding physiology.
Right.
So yeah, we can get into some of the hacks. I do a lot.
The first one I want to talk about is the taping of the mouth, because I've actually
sure.
asked you that question, and I've been waiting for this podcast. So I see you, taping your mouth, and you know what? You're not the only one. I've seen actually the retired player that came on the podcast. That's he runs his own gym and stuff. He does that while I saw him do it while driving one time. So I just want to know like when to do that and why
Yeah.
you do that.
So I'll tell you first. I'll give you the why I do it. Um, so here's the thing. When you breathe through your nose, like breathing is I think it's just so overlooked. You know, it's such a basic function that people are like, like what? I can modify my breathing and it has an effect on my body. And the reality is that it absolutely does because, you know, and I'll even mention, for example, my mom is a dentist, and it even goes as far as like adjusting your teeth and how you chew, and I'll get to that. But first, I want to go ahead and say that when you breathe through your nose, you can essentially breathe more efficiently because not only do you better humidify air, but you also can better filter air, and those are the two main sort of things that when you can breathe more efficiently, when you can inhale air and it's better humidified, for example, you can take away more oxygen. To make a very complicated physiological concept, a little easier to digest, when you breathe through your nose, you can breathe more efficiently. Obviously, when you do some types of activity, when you do really high intensity activity, breathing through your mouth is quicker, it's faster, and whatnot. But if you spend the majority of your day breathing through your nose, it's healthier. It actually helps your teeth align better. You have less issues with it also limits like things like bad breath. Um, it's very, very healthy for all kinds of enzymes and saliva and producing saliva and keeping your mouth, salivated. Um, but beyond that, another reason why I do it, and the two main reasons why I do this, besides breathing more efficiently, are because when you breathe through your nose, you tend to have better vagal activity. So activity in the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is a nerve that runs down from your brain all the way down through your body, through the majority of your body. And it's very closely associated with what's called the parasympathetic nervous system. So the central nervous system is your brain and spinal cord, right? And there's something called the autonomic nervous system, which is basically regulates automatic processes in your body through your nerves. And the autonomic nervous system is composed of the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. I know this is getting a little scientific, but basically,
Hey, if I'm keeping up, everybody should be keeping up.
basically, you could think about it. I'm sure you've heard of like the fight or flight
Yeah.
response, right?
Yeah.
So that's the sympathetic nervous system. So that basically gets you prepared to fight or flight. So like run away from a stressor, so a perceived stressor. And we perceive stressors. It's completely subjective. Like for example, you preparing for a hockey game might be as stressful for you as it is for me to prepare for an exam or to give a lecture, right? How we perceive it, like that response doesn't discriminate. It basically innervates the sympathetic nervous system, and then it's up to the parasympathetic nervous system to try to help us like cope with that stressor, or else it's too stressful for our physiology and it gives us all kinds of problems. So when you breathe through your nose, you activate what's called you tend to breathe also more diaphragmatically, meaning with your stomach, with the diaphragm. um, and that increases the activity of the vagus nerve, which means you have more parasympathetic activity, which means that you can better relax. So what's cool about it is nasal breathing essentially helps you stay more relaxed when you need to be relaxed. So like people ask me all the time, like, Andres, it seems like you're so busy all the time. You're always running around. You have different projects. You have different presentations. You're making content. You're doing all these things. Like, how do you meditate? The truth is I do meditate. I'll wake up in the morning. It's part of my morning routine. Maybe some mornings I'll meditate, but the thing is, I can get away with this. Is sort of like a life hack for me, like breathing through my nose. Naturally, I don't even have to tape my mouth anymore. I just naturally breathe through my nose, but it allows me to be in this sort of like relaxed state all the time. Now, what's important though is you also want to have like vagal tone goes both ways. You want to be able to innervate that parasympathetic rest and digest branch of the central nervous system efficiently. But when there's a stressor and you need to be active, you also want to be able to activate that like sympathetic activity as well. Like basically, you want to be able to switch between them quickly. And this is a concept that you can actually measure. It's something that you can actually measure with what's called heart rate variability, which is something that I discuss in other podcasts with other people, which is something that your listeners can tune into some other time. But
Right.
basically, to make a long story short, I do nasal breathing so that I can better innervate this like relaxation response when I need it.
Right.
And something that people can do is taping their mouths when they sleep, because that guarantees nasal breathing while they sleep and it guarantees a more relaxed state. So it can help you achieve better sleep, essentially. And that's why I do it. So something I want to get into with you is basically how to make the most of your sleep. And something else that I wanted to discuss is, I know that you recently got your raw optics, the
Yeah,
blue light blocking glasses.
yeah.
They're these, for people tuning in, it's like these red orange tinted glasses that look kind of funny, and you wear them a few hours before bed.
Cool, I'd say.
Yeah, I think they're fucking awesome. I love wearing mine.
Yeah, me too.
And what's cool is that they actually, going on a tangent here, but they block out the blue wavelengths of light. Not necessarily like blue, like obviously, if you look at a blue light while you're wearing these glasses, it looks completely gray. Um, but the thing is that even in any LED light, you have this spectrum of light, and in that spectrum are these blue wavelengths, and those are the wavelengths that are most responsible for inhibiting the production of melatonin. So when these blue wavelengths that you can find in any light source, essentially, or most light sources,
Literally when you open your eyes.
yeah. So when they interact with the back of your eye, the retina, they tell your brain, "Hey, it's go time. It's time to innervate the sympathetic nervous system. It's time to inhibit melatonin production. Like, it's daytime. We need to go." Because throughout evolution, the only source of blue light that we had was the sun. The sun is the most potent source of blue light. So we knew that when we woke up, we're inhibiting the production of melatonin, and we're ready to go, ready to start the day. It's daytime. It's go time. Now we have all these devices, all these lights late at night, and our body is constantly in this state where it thinks it's time to go. It's time to start the day, and that takes away from our sleep. So those are two little hacks right there. I wear my raw optics, and I can give you guys a discount code. Just use code HOLYFIT, 10% off. But I just want to go ahead and say that, I truly believe, like, it's not that I'm associated or affiliated with them and I'm just throwing out codes. Like, this is genuinely something that you can do that will have a profound impact on your quality of life, because it's an investment in your sleep.
Right,
And
right.
Nico can tell you from his experience. I can tell you from my experience. I can tell you the physiology behind it. Um,
Yeah, definitely. Oh, I
so
just want to touch on that real quick. Is that like ever since I got mine, like first of all, I love it. I wear them at night, and sometimes
a
I
few
forget.
hours before sleep, right?
Right, right, exactly. When the sun goes down, that's when I toss them on.
That's exactly when you should be doing it.
Right, right. I think you're the one that told me that actually. So, basically, like for those who don't know, and I actually asked Andres, like, should I get the day blue light blockers? And he said no. And the reason for not using the blue light blockers during the day is because during the day you are on go mode and you want to
Yeah,
be on go mode and you want
exactly.
that melatonin activated, right?
Yeah.
So,
But you
so
want it to be inhibited and activated at night. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I mixed that up. But so basically, like during the day, you want that blue light, you want to be in go mode. But at night, you want to be on your phone, you want to watch TV, but you want to start to wind down and you want your brain to
Exactly.
know that it's time to wind down. And what those glasses do is they let your brain know that it's time to wind down. You're not
Yeah.
taking any more blue light.
Exactly. And so what that helps you do with time is that when you're able to wake up and get that blue light in the morning, and then you prepare yourself for bed every night with, by limiting blue light or blocking blue light, it helps you set up a healthy circadian rhythm. So the circadian rhythm is literally a biological clock that tells your body, not just when it's daytime and nighttime, but it literally is involved in so many, essentially every process in your body, whether it's directly or indirectly. And it just prepares your body for a consistent way to, it's a consistent system that helps regulate all kinds of bodily processes. So you want to, that's why it's important to go to bed and wake up around the same time every day, so you can have a healthy circadian rhythm, because it's a great foundation for all other healthy habits, mood, performance, etc. Now, something else I wanted to say, just to go back to the nasal breathing. When you're nasal breathing, it also forces you to breathe a little more slowly. And I know that we're going to eventually get into, how to prepare your mindset for like a game or whatnot. Uh,
No, actually, go into this. I wanted to ask
you want
when
to transition into it?
No, I want to ask when is the best time, especially you just mentioned a great time to do nasal breathing is when you're sleeping and when
Yeah.
you just wake up. But for an athlete, like you mentioned, would it be smart to do nasal breathing on game day, like the whole day, leading up to the game and even in the locker room, and then right before warmups, you
Yeah.
start them out?
So I'll give you some little hacks, a combination of hacks that you can do. I know that the majority of athletes and high performance, people is they tend to get anxious, before a game. Like it's stressful. It's everything that you've dedicated your life. Like I've seen you, for example, you've dedicated your life to the sport, and I'm sure that every time you get into a game, it means a lot to you.
Right.
And you can be stressed, you can be anxious. So there are things that you can do to lower that sympathetic response so that you can make the most of your performance and be focused. Lower your heart rate, lower your cortisol, and just to be able to have just enough to perform. Because there's this concept in physiology, I forget the exact name, but for optimal performance, you want to be right between a very aware state, like a very stressed and focused state, and like a more relaxed state. You want to be like right in the middle to have a smooth, nice focus, right? And so I feel that for a lot of players, they're very overwhelmed, very stressed, and they can implement the following strategy. So number one, nasal breathing. Automatically, you're going to slow your breath. You're going to build up more CO2 in your lungs, I believe, which is going to help your lungs relax and slow the breath even more. So lower cortisol and adrenaline. Innervate the vagus nerve and have, better sympathetic activity, more release of GABA in the brain and in the periphery of the nervous system. And it's going to help relax you. So nasal breathing, but also diaphragmatic breathing and box breathing. So you can do a combination of the three. So breathing exercise, for example, is you breathe through your nose, you put one hand on your belly and like your thumb on your belly button, just so that you can feel your stomach expanding and contracting with each breath. Meaning you have to, because most people are very used to breathing with like their chest, like the top of their lungs or whatever. You want to breathe with your belly to innervate that vagus nerve. So you're belly breathing through your nose, and then you implement box breathing. So you do there's a few different ways you can do box breathing, but it's like one way is you do a 4-second inhale, hold for 4 seconds, 4-second exhale, and then hold that for 4 seconds, and then repeat that. And do it a few times. Maybe do it for like a couple minutes. Okay. And the three of those, dude, if there's a learning curve to it, no doubt. But bro, that is like such a good way to relax immediately. And it's actually I actually did a post about this on Instagram.
Yes, I was reading that one today.
Yeah, bro. That's the thing. It's so often overlooked. Like breath is so automatic and so it's so casual that people don't take it seriously, but it can have a huge, very profound effect on your physiology. So this is actually such a powerful strategy. And as I mentioned in that post, that Navy SEALs use this all the time. Doctors, lawyers, nurses, like high stress individuals and athletes, other elite athletes, they implement these strategies. A lot of them will do box breathing, nasal breathing, and diaphragmatic breathing.
So when's the best time to do these? Because I've actually ran you through, and I'm gonna run you through it again. Like a typical hockey game day is like, we wake up in the morning, we have our pregame skate, our warm up and skate, and then we get a little food in us and we take a nap. Usually, some guys nap, right? Some guys just chill for that 3-hour window. And then we have our pregame meal, and then we go to the rink and start to prepare with
here's what I would do. I would make sure that like the day before, or really most importantly, the day of, just try to breathe through your nose as much as possible. So like you can do the mouth taping and whatnot. But I would just try to breathe through your nose to be as relaxed as possible. That's the easiest thing to do. Like I'm sure that you can go about your morning just breathing through your nose.
Right.
So do that. So I always like to implement these strategies like when I anticipate stress. So the closer I get to like a presentation or a lecture or a podcast, whatever it is, the more I'll maybe like start, like I know my body will be in a more like sympathetic state, in a more stressed state. So I'll start to maybe implement some box breathing, some diaphragmatic breathing. I basically try to anticipate it and try to implement those strategies early. So I guess the closer you are to the game, the more seriously you can take these breathing techniques. But nasal breathing should be like, something that you're always doing. And not just for performance, just throughout your life. I think nasal breathing is always going to be the healthiest way to breathe. And there's a lot of research that backs that up.
That's awesome.
And it also helps you, you want to have good breath for the ladies or for the dudes if you're into that. But you want to have good breath for everybody, Absolutely. So it helps you also have it helps limit like chronic bad breath.
Okay, and that's awesome stuff, dude. I'm definitely going to start implementing that to my game day. I know a lot of guys are going to start implementing that to their game day, so that is fucking awesome, bro. And another thing I want to get into that I will definitely start implementing in my game day, it's one of those things that like I did implement in my game day at times. And then one of those things that like, it's a good habit that I unconsciously got away from. And that's visualization.
Oh, dude, that's huge.
And yeah,
That's
so
huge.
visualization, I mean, I know a lot of guys, everyone that's watching or almost everyone that's listening is a hockey player and might be familiar with 24/7. So for those listening that aren't, 24/7 is this thing that the NHL does for the Winter Classic, which is like this NHL tournament kind of. And they basically show a player and they show his 24/7. They show his lifestyle and everything. And one of them, I forgot who, I think it was Brendan Gallagher. They showed him on the bench and he was legit with his stick looking at the ice, empty ice sheet, and just, you know, moving the stick and visualizing. And since then, I actually started to implement it a little bit. And like I just mentioned, I got away from it. I don't know why. But that's something that I really want to get into because I know visualization is backed by science. And I just want to hear your thoughts on visualization and how that can help you help your performance.
Dude, it is huge. It's if you can do it well enough, it's almost like an unfair strategy because it allows you to practice without practicing. And I'll just tell you that I've taken, dude, numerous classes in neuroscience, in psychology, in psychology of exercise, and sports psychology, and all kinds of classes. And this is one of the themes that is just it's a constant theme. It's like when you can visualize these actions, these behaviors, these routines, it basically, if you can think about them so deeply and so specifically, and you can, the better you are at visualizing, literally at the neuromuscular and neurochemical level, the better you can train your brain to handle these situations ideally when they actually happen. So like if you visualize as specifically as possible, the most specific details about
Like
the
getting, like
ice.
for example, like this is one thing that I used to do. So in hockey, I'm a winger.
Mhm.
So a very common breakout is getting the puck from the defenseman and then just automatically, like there might be a guy on you. If there's a guy on you, you got to chip it off the wall or make a pass. If there's not a guy on you, you got to know that right away and go. You know
Exactly.
what I mean? So that's one of the things that I remember when I was visualizing. I would always visualize that play of getting the puck on that wall. And I would visualize it as a guy coming and I chip it. I would visualize it as a guy coming or not coming and I go. You know what
Right.
I mean? And can you talk a bit about how your brain thinks that's the same?
Dude, yeah, bro, it's actually, it blows my mind. It's so fascinating to me because it's so real. And again, it's one of these things that's just overlooked. I know that a lot of the guys that are tuning in, they take the sport seriously. Like they take this more seriously than anything else. Listen, for those guys that take this shit seriously, I'm sure a few, I don't know if all of them are going to implement these strategies, but I'll just tell you this, that those that do and they do it right, they're going to take their game to a whole new level. I don't care where they are on the spectrum or how good they are. It's going to change their game. You want to think about it as specifically as possible. Like you want to think, what muscles are you contracting? How are you moving? What are you seeing? How does the ice feel under your feet? How does, just not only feeling it, but seeing it and trying to imagine different situations. And what I would do is I would spend, as an athlete, I would try to spend, I'm not an athlete myself, but I'll get into some of the things that I do because, I am athletic and I'll get into that and how I practice visualization. But I'll just go ahead and say that if you can take 30 minutes to an hour every day, closing your eyes, maybe you can wear your hockey gear, maybe you can,
Hold the stick even.
or hold a stick, but just close your eyes and visualize exact situations and how you would respond. And if you can do it specifically enough, literally thinking about what muscles you would contract, if you can think about it specifically enough, your brain won't know the difference between that experience and a real experience. Like the way that your brain will think about it and interpret it and save that memory is as if it really happened. Yeah. So you can literally practice with your imagination. And this is something that's been proven by science, by studies. They've actually done studies, and this goes way back. I was recently reading a book called Psycho-Cybernetics, and it's all about your self-image and how to adjust your self-image and whatnot. And it talks about visualization. But this book was written in like the 1950s or 60s, and it's a classic book written by a plastic surgeon, very famous plastic surgeon. And dude, even then it talks about how they did studies where they took basketball players and they had people practice with actual ball shooting shooting the ball. And then they had other people that were practicing just by visualizing 30 minutes a day, exactly how they would shoot this ball and make a, free throw or whatever. And then they did a test and they found that the people that were visualizing were just as successful as the people that were actually practicing free throws. Now, that study,
Wow.
now, all right, I know that sounds really like that, like too good to be true. That was one study. It wasn't a very huge sample size. The statistical significance, which is something that we talk about in science, the statistical significance, maybe it wasn't the most statistically valid study, but it's one example. And since the 60s, there's just been multitudes of studies that you can look up and see that visualization is a very real thing, and it takes practice. But the more time you dedicate it to it, and the better you, and the more, because it's one thing to actually, sit down and try and do it, but it's another thing to like really believe in it and put yourself in that situation and practice it like as specifically as possible. Dude, it makes a world of a difference. Again, practicing without practicing, bro.
Well, for hockey, that's huge. First of all, I'm going to start doing that all the time for sure. But for hockey, that's huge because, especially for me growing up in Miami, Florida, and I know a lot of guys, especially right now with the pandemic, are having a hard time getting ice. Hockey's not like soccer where you can just go outside, kick a soccer ball around, or you can go outside and shoot some hoops. You need ice. You need to get fully equipped. You need to go out and it takes
That's a
time.
good point because you were injured too, and that's actually that I'm glad that you brought that up because people can apply this when they're injured or when they're taking a break. Because the way that practice works, when you practice any kind of movement, when you're practicing for a sport, for a certain position or certain play, you're literally programming your body at the neuromuscular level. There's different motor units, different firing patterns. Like you're literally programming your body to react ideally to situations. That's what it takes to be an athlete. Like you spent years programming yourself to do specific things. And it's a matter of how well you can innovate and how well you can basically get those connections to fire when you're actually in the game. So you practice, establish these connections. All right, now how can you do this then in the game, right? And obviously there's different things involved in your performance during the game. Are you anxious? How was your sleep? How's your nutrition? Is there a lot of pressure and whatnot? Because it's very different, that environment, from like your training environment. But one thing that you can do to preserve those firing patterns, those connections, those actions are literally by imagining them as specifically as possible. And I guarantee that someone who's injured or someone that's taking a break or someone that doesn't have access to a gym right now or a rink, I promise you, if you can visualize exactly what it is that you do, what it is that you want to improve, what it is that you want to maintain, if you visualize it, that is going to be an incredible form of practice.
Wow. Unreal.
Yeah,
Unreal
dude, it's
stuff.
actually like I get excited talking about it
I'm gonna
because
dedicate an hour 30 minutes tonight, dude. No, not even joking right now.
it's pretty crazy stuff.
That's awesome, dude. And wow, that's awesome. So let's go into sleep. I mean, I mentioned I told you before the pod, but I sweat in my sleep and I don't know
Yeah,
why, but then the temperature in my house is 74 and you mentioned that that's way too hot for sleep. So
way too hot.
can you go into like what's the right temperature for sleep?
Yeah,
What's the right amount of time for sleep? What's the all the right ways to sleep?
yeah. I love that we're talking about all these things that are just so overlooked. And I know that it's like I do these things myself and I take it for granted sometimes. Like I get great sleep, I have great performance, all that stuff. But dude, it's just small things that you can
So
do.
overlooked. And you know what? I've been into fitness and stuff for a while now, kind of a couple of years. I've been really into the off ice part of hockey and improving my game off the ice. And these are little things that I just kind of started to really get into
You
because
take
these
it
are
for
ways,
granted sometimes, like, am I
yeah,
breathing? Like my sleep,
yeah,
my
because these are
temperature.
ways that you can improve that are so easy, so little, and you can do them at home in your
Yeah,
room. It's
yeah.
insane. So
It's almost unfair.
yeah, so let's get into sleep,
So
man.
yeah. Yeah, I'll start off with the temperature thing. So again, they've done a bunch of studies on sleep and whatnot, and they found that for the best sleep, generally you want to set the temperature to between 65 and 68. Now that may seem very, very cold, right? I personally do 68. And before I would sleep, with temperature around 70, and I would just wear, be in my boxers, and that's it. Just my boxers, and I go to sleep. Now what I'm doing is I'll set the temperature to 68, and I'll wear a shirt, I wear sweatpants and socks, right?
Just sleep.
To sleep. Yeah, because it's colder, and sometimes I'll even go like 66, 67. But I'll wear this to sleep because uh, essentially you want your core temperature, you want your core to be cool. That's the goal. That's going to help you get good sleep. Is you want to have a cool core. And one of the reasons why I wear socks, for example, it is an example, is because, your hands and feet are like fountains of heat. Like basically, if your feet are cold, the rest of your body's gonna be cold. If your hands are cold, that's kind of how it works. But now, if you wear socks, it basically gives, I forget exactly the mechanism, but all I know is that it sort of modifies how your body interprets the heat at your feet, and then that can help you regulate your core temperature. So when you wear socks, it actually helps your feet stay warm, but it also keeps your core cold. Something like, I forget exactly how it is, but I found that ever since I started lowering the temperature and wearing socks, those two things have had a dramatic impact on my sleep. Um, and
That's gonna be
you
tough for me because I'm a naked sleeper.
Yeah, I used to sleep naked too, and I used to do that as well. Um, but dude, now I've been lowering the temperature, and what it allows me to do is for example, if I get too hot at night, I can easily just take off a
Hey,
layer. I can take
yep.
something off, and I just feel better. Whereas like if I was, too cold and then I had to like go and put something on, you stand up from your bed, your heart rate goes up, it's hard to fall back asleep. So I've been doing that, and it definitely helps. Lowering the temperature definitely helps 100%. Um,
Another thing is EMF. You just mentioned
yeah,
I actually
yeah.
been doing it for the past 3 days. I've been putting my phone on airplane mode, and
Yes.
you know what? I've slept amazing the past 3 days. I'm sure it's attached to that. But
Yeah.
at the same time, the better thing that I found is that my phone would ring at night sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
I like to go to bed around 10 p.m. I go to bed decently, like very early, especially to people our age. So
Yeah.
I like to shut my phone down at like 9:30 now. I put it on airplane mode pretty much. And dude, it's so much better to be in bed watching TV with my blue light, obviously, glasses. It's so much better to be in bed watching TV without the phone dinging
Yeah.
than with the phone dinging. And like me in my head knowing that that phone is not gonna ring, like it gives me a little peace.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about that. So beyond the, lowering the temperature, um, some things I recommend is before you go to bed, implement those breathing strategies. It'll help you get in a relaxed state for breathing. It'll slow your breathing, slow your heart rate, and just literally improve the quality of your sleep. Wearing the blue light blockers, lowering the temperature, so on and so forth. Um, but then what you want to do is for EMF.
Which
Now,
is electromagnetic.
electromagnetic fields, it's like a radiation. And the truth is that these devices do give off, a certain amount of radiation. Your phone gives off radiation. Other Bluetooth devices, they have some form of EMF that is not very good for your physiology, but the research on it has been, in my opinion, I apologize if you hear dogs barking in the background.
Oh, that's okay. Mine will start barking too. Oh, that's no
But
problem.
the truth is that uh, EMF does have an effect on your physiology. It's just not very, a lot of people don't talk about it because it is like controversial. And, with companies like Apple and all these big companies that are developing these devices, they don't really want you to know that it's unhealthy, right? So it's even uncomfortable for me to talk about because it's so like looked down upon. Like people are like, "What? You think these Bluetooth devices are affecting your physiology?" And the truth is, yeah, they are. And even though it's not like such a popular opinion, I'd rather take a proactive and preventative approach. Like better safe than sorry, in my opinion. And what are you going to miss out on if you put your phone on airplane mode while you sleep?
Yep.
And I actually just spoke, my last podcast, my last guest was a guy named Dr. Jay Wiles. He's a badass guy. He's all about EMF, and he's actually the co-host. I don't know if maybe some of the people tuning in may know this guy, Ben Greenfield. He's like a top exercise physiologist, crazy author, speaker. So Dr. Jay Wiles, the guy that I had on, is the co-host of his podcast. He also owns a center called Thrive Wellness and Performance. This guy's like certified in like, biometrics and HRV and measuring, your physiology and work. He works with like Olympic medal athletes, all these people. Basically, he told me that EMF, it does accumulate. And when you have all these devices, one of the things that it does is there's these positively charged ions that build up in your body. And throughout evolution, human beings didn't have that kind of exposure to positively charged ions. We didn't have these devices. And in addition, we did what's called grounding, is we walked everywhere like barefoot. We didn't have these shoes with insulated soles. Um, And that's important because the earth itself is negatively charged, right? And so now when we have these soles on our feet, we're basically insulated. We don't get earth's negative charge. And on
And
top of that, we
getting
have
all these positive charges from all these devices as well at the same
yeah,
time.
yeah. So then it's that. So we're cut off from that negative charge. And then in addition, we get this positive charge from all these Bluetooth devices. And that may seem a little like woo woo, right? But again, science is there. It's not very sexy, but it's there. And I want to take a preventative approach.
Absolutely.
And then he was telling me actually that this can have like this change in charge can actually affect what are called your calcium channels, which are essentially how like all of the muscles in your body depend on these calcium channels to perform actions. And so it can change their activity. It can make them fire more or fire less,
Yeah,
depending on the
it
exposure.
can make you feel drained, at times when I'm on my phone for way too much, like
Yeah, no,
I get
totally.
that drained feeling, and
Yeah.
I get that feeling in my eyes where, fuck, dude, I got to put my phone down for a bit.
Yeah, exactly. Like I know that I'm very sensitive, for example, to like my earpods, my Apple AirPods. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what AirPods. And think about it, like they're very cool. Everybody wants a pair of AirPods, but they're like sitting on your skin and they're like, you know, like
Bluetooth.
it's Bluetooth, like it's like so close to your brain. Like I like really, do you really want that? Why don't you just wear? I just wear now my wired earphones and I feel way better. Um, but anyway, so one thing that you can do to decrease your charge, be more negatively charged. And again, I know like this all sounds so woo woo, but I think it's very real. You can do what's called grounding. So, walk around barefoot, go walk on the grass, walk the beach, like walk around barefoot. I wear these shoes called Earth Runners that actually have a copper anode on the bottom and it goes all around your foot. And so it keeps you negatively charged while you're still wearing shoes. And there's other shoes that do this. Um, um, Obviously, limit your EMF exposure. Turn off Bluetooth devices. Turn off Wi-Fi before you go to bed. Put your phone on airplane mode. Those are all great strategies. And think about it, like your phone is, if you're sleeping enough, which is about 7.5, 8 hours, that's a third of your life. It's literally a whole third of your life. And if you can limit your EMF exposure to a third of your life, and you just have, limit it every night, just turn it off, put it on airplane mode. It's a very proactive approach, in my opinion, to health and performance.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
Absolutely. I want to get a little bit more into the grounding and, doing stuff barefoot, because it maybe they don't think about the science behind it, but I see it definitely getting more popular in gyms, people doing stuff barefoot, whether it be like squatting or whatever it may be. And I've actually implemented it into my program and into what I do. When I do my balance stuff, I like to
I
do,
noticed you're always barefoot. Yeah,
right, especially when I do balance isometrics, because I find when you do balance isometrics and hold for a really long time, you work those little kind of twitch muscles in your foot and
yeah,
ankle that maybe you can't work as well with your shoes on. So, like, for example, for me as a hockey player, I mean, we use our foot and ankle so much in our stride inside our,
absolutely.
that we don't even like realize all those little twitch muscles in the foot and ankle, how important those are
Yeah,
for us as hockey players. And I think for pretty much every athlete. So for me, implementing this balance stuff with my foot, I've improved my balance, dude, by like quintuple, like
yeah,
I'm 5 times better at balance.
100%.
And, I give a lot of credit to being barefoot and, not just that, but um, I do all my workouts barefoot because I do body weight workouts, right? I'm not lifting weights or anything, and I'm on a mat. So I do body weight workouts barefoot, and I've seen strength gain, flexibility gain, balance gain, mobility gain. I've gained in every area of the spectrum. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? Training in this new way, and that's something that I also want to get into with this, because we're kind of along the topic, and that's like the hockey's traditional ways of training. It's insane that these haven't changed, but like ever since I was growing up, like that's how my summer training was set up, where in 3 phases, where it's like you get back into it kind of, but then the first phase is you're lifting heavy, you're trying to up your maxes, you're trying to get stronger, lifting heavy. And then the second phase would be kind of more reps, less weight, kind of muscle endurance. And then the last phase will be more kind of sprinting and that kind of stuff. And I think now, with all the information and modern information that we have, like, people got to get away from that. Like, people got to start to implement power, strength, balance in every workout, because it's very possible. And, I don't know what it is about hockey, but hockey is one of those sports that just doesn't evolve well, if that makes any sense.
Very traditional, yeah.
Very traditional. For example, like in the NBA and in football, you see guys coming into the rink, or coming into the field or court, sorry, and they're dripping, they're showing personality, they're wearing whatever they want, flashy, and that's
and they're all bigger on social media, sharing their approaches.
Exactly. And you don't really think about that as in a connection, but it is in connection, because hockey guys are still kind of, you look at a hockey player versus a basketball player on Instagram, like, hockey players are very inactive. And when they walk into the rink, there's still that suit dress code that's been there forever. So for me, it's just like the whole game as a whole needs to modernize. And one of the main things that it needs to start with is its training, because training, there's so much science behind body weight training, or even lightweight training, where, guys are really hurting themselves by trying to up their max weight, by trying to squat so much and hang clean so much. Like, there's so many different new ways to build this power.
In my opinion, muscle. It's just that's completely unnecessary.
Right. So can you get into just like, lifting weights, or can you get into just like
I'll start with totally. I'll start with the barefoot conversation we were having. So what's cool about that is, when you're wearing these shoes that, like, because most athletic shoes, they don't give your toes, for example, enough room to spread out, right? And on top of that, they provide this artificial arch that you don't want. Like, it's there. Maybe it'll help you run more efficiently and whatnot. But they've actually found that ever since people started wearing these, like, running and athletic shoes, the rates of injury have gone up, and people mess themselves. They mess up their posture. They mess up their heels. They put so much pressure on their knees, and it just completely messes you up. Maybe you can run faster, sure, and whatnot, but it really messes up your body. I think ideally an athlete should train barefoot and then train in exactly the shoes that they have to wear for their sport. So, for example, for hockey players, they should be barefoot to make the most of, because when you're barefoot, you make the most of every, like you said, the most of every little tiny muscle in your foot, and it's not supported artificially, by the shoe. So you give your toes enough room to spread out. You can better develop your balance that way. You can better develop an arc. And I'll tell you, like, if you look at the anatomy, like human anatomy, the feet and hands are just so full of these tiny little bones, tiny little muscles and ligaments. They're so, like, complex. So to make the most of it, you want to be as natural as possible. And then obviously, you want to train with the skates, because you want to mimic that environment as much as possible. So making the most of it, but then also training with the right stuff as well. When you spend so much time training in a gym with shoes that are completely different from the shoes that you're going to be wearing when you're skating, that's not very efficient. It all goes back to developing, like I said earlier, that the right firing patterns and the right patterns, the right, literally the connection between your central nervous system, your brain and spinal cord, and the rest of your muscles, and performing very specific movement patterns and very specific plays and whatnot. You're literally programming yourself. Why would you dedicate hours and hours and hours and hours to learning how to do a clean or a squat or whatever it is if you're playing hockey? The only people that should be dedicating that much time to squats and cleans are Olympic lifters that are doing that exact movement. You want to mimic the environment, like I said, as much as possible. So you want to do that with visualization. You want to do that by being in the gym and practicing and mimicking the sport as closely as possible. So one thing that we were talking about earlier, before we did the podcast, we were discussing some of these topics. We were talking about how hockey is a sport where, you know, you're at one point you're just gliding on the ice, another point you're boom, like you're like, you know, ruffling around, like it can be very, it can intensify very quickly. Like you have to,
Right.
it can be very, very
And more
chill and it's very
more like
intense.
45 seconds on the ice, and then you're sitting on the bench,
Yeah,
literally.
exactly.
Stop.
Exactly. The activity is very inconsistent in terms of its intensity and what you're actually doing. And so you need to train to mimic that, right? So I think that, for example, people that are coaching hockey players should tell them, all right, do this movement, now do this, now do that. Like they can't, it has to be like unexpected. There has to be that element of surprise, right?
Right.
So it's important to train, for example, explosiveness. It's going to be huge. It's important to train all different energy systems. So, you know, explosiveness, so train your power, train your strength, do isometric holds, do all of it. You have to focus on the eccentrics and the concentrics, which we'll get into, but you have to do everything, all of it. And obviously the best way to practice hockey is playing hockey, but you can't always play hockey. And when you can't always play hockey, visualize. And when you're in the gym, mimic these movements. I think that bodyweight training is a great way to do it, because with bodyweight training, you're using muscles in a way that makes sense to your body. Think about how often you're going to be performing something like a clean or something similar to a clean when you're playing hockey. Never. Never. Why would you waste your time doing that? Sure, it'll make you stronger and better at doing cleans. That's all it's accomplishing, period. Maybe certain muscles are going to be better and stronger, but not for hockey, not for specific movements that you're going to be doing, period. That's the end of story. From a neuromuscular and exercise physiological, it's just, it doesn't make sense, period.
I
End of
love to
story.
hear this. I'm thinking of one of my friends right now that I'm gonna make him listen to this podcast. A hang clean monster and a squatting monster. And I'll give
People
it
can
to him.
argue with me all that they want. It just doesn't make sense.
Right. And that's why, you know, I'm trying to, and, you know, the program that we're going to be working on and we're working on together. And, you know, I've kind of already kind of started it a little bit and done some test runs is all body weight. And the reason why I realized, like, holy fuck, like this is good, is because I started doing these workouts myself and they were hard for me. And they were hard for me, not in the sense that I felt after the gym, but they were hard for me in the sense that I felt after I got off the ice. Because when you practice, this is always how I basically sell it, right? When you practice hockey, are you gassed after? Are you exhausted? Are your muscles exhausted? Yes. Do you have any weight on your back when you do that? No. So why do you think that you
That's
need
exactly.
to exhaust those hockey muscles or get those hockey muscles better? What you should do is hold a squat, isometric hold, because when you're playing hockey, you're trying to be
Constantly,
low.
yeah, you're
Always
constantly in that position.
trying to be low.
Exactly.
Then you go from isometric to explosive, because in hockey, you're not only low, but you're also using explosiveness, right? So you go to explosive. And then from there, eccentric, or, you know, you mix those patterns up, because, and for those who don't know eccentric and concentric, it's slow.
I can do a quick review on concentric.
Yep. Give us a quick review.
So a concentric exercise is when the moving muscle shortens while developing tension. So for example, curling a dumbbell up, standing up in a squat, pulling up on a pull-up, et cetera, et cetera. Eccentric is when the moving muscle lengthens while developing tension. So resisting the dumbbell on the way down, slowly squatting down, or lowering yourself from a pull-up bar. In an eccentric contraction, there's less muscle fiber recruited for comparable workloads. And by recruiting less to move an equal amount of weight, the fibers are more damaged, leading to more inflammation and generating more growth. So essentially, you can accomplish more and more efficiently by focusing on the eccentric in terms of strength and hypertrophy.
Right.
So the concentric portion is still very important. So the positive portion, the curling up, the pulling up, etc. It's important because it gauges how much muscle fiber is recruited. However, if you're attempting to maximize muscle growth, muscle development, more attention should be paid to the eccentric portion, since it has a higher capacity to stimulate hypertrophy.
For example, one of my favorite ever exercises is when you squat jump and you catch yourself landing and you go slow.
Absolutely, dude. I'll tell you right now, if you are an athlete, unless you are a bodybuilder or someone just trying to put on straight strength and muscle, which is not what a meathead, unless you're a meathead, that is like the perfect thing for a hockey player to do, something like that. Focusing on the eccentric, focusing on the isometrics, and again, getting those firing patterns, because that's the programming your brain and your body needs for hockey, period. End of story. That's it. And something else, if, just to get a little more scientific, just to kind of, so people can, I think it's something I like to add. I want to add just to make this.
Add some flavor.
I'm going to add some flavor to it. So the eccentric contractions, there's greater tension / cross-sectional area of active muscle than concentric contractions. High tensile forces during eccentric contractions cause greater disruption of muscle cell membranes and structural proteins.
So the longer your muscle's under tension, the more it's bound to grow.
Yes, exactly. And then when there's lower oxygen consumption and greater use of parallel and series elastic components, this enhances energy return, increases muscle efficiency, and decreases potential for fatigue. So you'll be less fatigued because think about it, you're kind of going with gravity as well. There's less potential for fatigue, but you're still contracting these muscles. They're still under tension, right?
Right.
So there's actually more heat produced during eccentric contractions, which translates to more damage to structural and functional components. There's more inflammation, but beneficial inflammation for the muscle. And then this greater breakdown and more inflammation results in better growth of the muscle, better adaptation.
And here's the thing, the tension that you get, it's the same exact tension that you get on the ice. Because especially like if you're doing this, like towards the end of my workouts, when I'm doing explosive to eccentric, like I legit get the burn that I get after a really long shift on the ice, which is something that I never really got to feel when I was lifting weights, because you lift heavy 6 reps and then you take a break. But like in hockey, you're out there for 45 seconds. So 6 reps ain't enough. You can't do 6 reps and then take a break, because that took you 10 seconds or 15 seconds. Yeah. Whereas in reality, you're better off even just doing high knees for 45 seconds, kind of, and then staying in a squat or something.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I was actually trying to explain this concept the other day in a video that I was making, and this is kind of how I simplified it. So think about it this way. If you're lifting very, very heavy weight, like let's say you're squatting 3 plates, right? And you can only do like 4 reps, right? Let's say you do it for 4 reps, and until you get to that 5th rep is a huge jump, right? You basically round it down to the nearest whole number of reps. You can't do like 4.5. You can only do 4, right? But think about this. If you squat a lot less, so let's say you take the number, for example, let's say you take the number 40. How many times can the number 40 go into 100? Completely. 2 times, right? 2.5 times 40 is 100, right? So let's say that 40 represents that heavy weight. You can only do it twice in 100. But now let's say you take the number 20. The number 20 goes into 100 perfectly 5 times. So when you do lighter weight, you can actually push yourself exactly to like more closer to your max, right? And this is important for hockey. Now I'm taking a very, very complicated, physiological concept. I'm trying to simplify it as much as possible. So, but basically with hockey, you're holding these contractions for a long period of time. You're doing these isometric holds. You're building metabolites. So that burn that you get is actually hydrogen ions that build up. And then what happens is that there's something called lactate, which goes in to try to clear out those hydrogen ions and tries to stabilize that reaction. Because the more acidity you have, the more hydrogen ions that you have, the more burn you feel. And it's literally inhibits your muscle from performing that contraction. And that's not something that you will achieve when you do very, very heavy squats, very, very heavy weight. So it doesn't make sense, because what happens with that kind of training, when you do isometric holds, when you do lighter weight, so like body weight training, you can more closely push yourself to that max, and you build these metabolites like the hydrogen ions. Your body with that kind of training gets better at delivering lactate and at taking out those metabolites and at basically helping you deal with that burn, and it helps you extend those maxes. It helps you build up on those maxes. And what's really cool is that the more lactate that you produce when you do these kind of exercises, the more lactate you produce, the more testosterone you release, the more growth hormone you release. So it's just, bro, it's a beautiful thing,
And you know what's crazy, Andres, is that I've had this one problem, and I still have it my whole hockey career, which is I stand up too straight when I'm on the ice. And when you stand up too straight, it cuts down your stride. So like the lower you are, the longer you can
And your
extend.
balance as well.
Yeah, the lower you are, the longer you can extend your leg. You're more grounded. You're heavier, all
Yeah.
that stuff. So it's just a thing in hockey that like you want to be low because it's just going to benefit you 100%. It's a fact, right? So one of my problems my whole life is that I stand too straight, and I've tried it, dude. And I've worked with guys on the ice where I try to go low. It just feels uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And off the ice, what was I doing? I was squatting. I was getting low on my squats, but when you squat, you go down and you come back up. You go down and you come back up.
Yeah.
In hockey, what I'm trying to do is stay low.
Exactly. It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense.
So now I've realized, like, holy fuck, man, I'm actually finally learning how to get low now, because you know what I'm doing? I'm literally getting low and I'm doing that movement like with my feet. And I've seen, I haven't skated yet. I just got cleared actually from my injury, so I'll be skating soon, but I haven't skated yet. But I can just feel in my head the confidence that I have, like, dude, I'm gonna be lower when I get out there, because I can stay in that low position for a minute and stride out off the ice.
Yeah, I'll just give you one example of something that just makes more sense from a physiological and anatomical perspective right off the bat. Bro, instead of squats, bro, wall sits. Sit against the wall and hold that contraction, that isometric hold, and that's going to prepare you better for hockey than any.
How about this for hockey players?
Sport.
Because we're always switching legs. You wall sit, lift.
I was just going to say, like
put it down.
Yeah. Do a wall sit, lift your legs here and there, and then while you're doing that, visualize yourself on the ice. Boom! You just killed 3 birds with 1 stone, bro.
Awesome, fucking awesome. Okay, and let's see, dynamic warm-ups and stretching, because one of the biggest things in hockey, when I get into the room, I like to always be there early. I'm obviously the guy on the aux because I got the best music on the team. And, usually when you're there too early, the dynamic warm-up for most teams is done as a team. So it's set time by the captain. It's not up to you when the dynamic warm-up starts. So when you're a guy that likes to get there early, what do you do before the dynamic warm-up? So most guys just sit down in the middle of the room and stretch. And that is terrible, as you've taught me. So can we get into that?
Oh, absolutely. So here's a dynamic warm-up is basically a movement-based stretch, right? So, and it's the best stretching that you can do, and the best thing you can do before you approach some kind of exercise or activity. When you stretch, so I'll start with this. Stretching is literally telling a muscle to relax. And there's actually something called reciprocal inhibition. Just to give you an example, there's something called reciprocal inhibition, which is like, if I take my bicep and I flex and I contract my bicep, with reciprocal inhibition, the opposite or the opposing muscle, which is my tricep, is forced to relax. When you flex your bicep, you're forcing your tricep to relax. And that's what almost every muscle in your body has, an opposing muscle group. And with reciprocal inhibition, when you contract one, you relax the other. If you start off your hockey, if you start off let's say before the game,
like when you're
cold, and being cold, you start stretching when your muscle isn't, you have to be warm it's like a rubber band. When you heat up a rubber band, it stretches better, it's more compliant. If you just start literally stretching when you're completely cold, it's going to increase your risk of injury, and it's going to tell your muscle, hey, it's time to relax. Like, we don't need to be contracted. It's time to relax right now. So they've actually done studies, tons of studies, where they measure performance and actually risk of injury when people like straight up stretch before an exercise, and when they stretch after exercise. It doesn't make sense to stretch before, because number one is it's going to inhibit your muscles, and it will decrease your strength. Stretching too much will decrease your strength. You can fact check me. It's true.
I believe you.
It's just not a popular opinion. Not a lot of people know that. And in addition, it increases your risk of injury because your muscles are cold. Dynamic warm-ups, the best way to do them is you want to mimic the movement that you're going to be doing when you perform your activity. So I'll give you an example. A perfect dynamic warm-up for a leg day, for me, for example, is I'll do lunges, right? So I'll do deep lunges, and I'll get a movement-based stretch, because with the lunge you can stretch your legs out enough where it's a nice stretch.
Oh yeah, your hip flexor.
It's specific to what I'm going to do later on, so it's specific to legs. and it's giving me enough of a stretch, but not to the point where I'm, relaxing my muscle or increasing my risk of injury, but just enough to prepare the right motor unit firing patterns that I need to then do my leg day. So
Right. A dynamic warm up, you're kind of getting that stretch in while waking the muscles up instead of getting the
yeah,
stretch.
you're basically telling your muscle like this is what we're gonna need you to do in a little bit, and I'm just getting you warm, and I'm just getting the right motor units firing from my brain all the way to the muscle. I'm getting the right things going for this activity. That's exactly what you're doing. And stretching before is not a good idea. The best time to really stretch is going to be after. Yeah, once your muscles are warm, once they have enough blood flow, all of that is going to make it so that you can literally relax the muscle and you get the most out of the stretching without increasing your risk of injury or decreasing your strength. So you want the
Awesome
dynamic
stuff.
warm up to be specific. Yeah.
Awesome stuff, man. I know I'm taking so much from this right now. I can't even imagine everybody else because
It's,
I actually, not study this, but I actually research this stuff. Like I love this stuff now,
yeah.
like I'm always looking for ways to improve now and, try to kind of get better, with little things. And these
Yeah.
are a lot of little things that will add up. I mean, we're hearing from a science guy, so,
I'll tell you what's really crazy is like the more I talk about this, like I'm sure you can tell it fascinates just even me. I've seen this over and over and over again. I've studied it, I've worked with athletes, and it still fascinates me every time I talk about it because, and you've researched
it's
it too, but
insane.
me telling you about it, you as an athlete, it's like it's so exciting for me. And when I work, so now this is me talking obviously broadly about hockey, the sport of hockey.
Yeah.
But when I work with people that are like I've worked with athletes that have a specific role in a specific team for a specific sport. And so it can get even more specific. Like you can take this and be
Each player should have their own, their own dynamic.
I've played the role of being a physiologist for a player, not even for a team, for a player. So think about that, how specific these things can get. This is obviously a lot of information and it's still specific to hockey, but it can get even more specific, it just blows my mind.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And one topic that I really want to get into right now is eating, because eating is something that, I mean, a lot of people that know me know that I've tried the keto diet. I did the keto diet for a while and I loved it. I
So
actually
what got you into that?
so the keto diet, I actually got into it because my chiropractor, Dr. Harley Bofshever, he was very out of shape and he used to be a bodybuilder. And then he got into the ketogenic diet and was working out 2 times a week for 30 minutes. And he got shredded. Like when I
Yeah.
mean shredded, like this guy's 50 something and he's shredded. And he's
Yeah.
been doing the keto for a year and a half. And I got into it last summer for 3 months and the results were insane. My body fat dropped a shit ton and I was shredded. Right.
Yeah.
And I felt great too. Then when the season came along, I started to mix in the carbs again and whatnot. And now that when the off season started, when this whole pandemic started, I got back into the keto because I was out of shape due to injury and stuff. And it helped me really get back into shape. But more than keto, I want to talk about this. Just a low carb, high protein diet,
Yeah.
rather than the extreme of the ketogenic diet. I
Yeah.
think a high protein, low carb, people don't realize that like carbs are out, man. Carbs are out. Like carbs are not in, carbs are out. So except for healthy carbs, which we'll get into, but
Yeah.
can you just get into like carb supplementation, like glycogen, like what what athletes should be eating?
Right. So I can definitely get into that. First, I wanna go ahead and quickly just I wanna talk about the keto diet for just a second because I think that it's great that you did this while you were on sort of like a training break. I think it's ideal, and I'll tell you why. Because so our central nervous system and our bodies, the most efficient fuel source for the body is carbohydrate. Period. It's the most efficient, right? You at any given moment, we're running off of a few energy systems. We're actually using it, and it depends which one you use primarily. Depends on the intensity of activity that you're doing. But at any given moment, you and I right now are running on some amount of creatine phosphate, which is like creatine. We're running off of some amount of glucose, carbohydrate. We're running off of some amount of protein and some amount of fat. Those four at any given moment, we're running off of those four with the highest intensity stuff, creatine phosphate, then high intensity, medium intensity, mostly glucose, lower intensity, fat, and then protein is always to some degree, right? When you're on a ketogenic diet and you're consuming more fat and you're low carb, you're teaching your body how to more efficiently use fat as a fuel source. And the reason that that's beneficial for a training break is because when you're very glucose adapted, and then you're not doing activity like you were, it's very easy for your body to, in order to maintain itself, it can break down muscle tissue and convert it to glucose as a fuel source, and you can essentially lose muscle, right? That's the simplest way to put it. Is if you're taking a long training break, you're not training like you used to, you can lose muscle. When you're on a ketogenic diet and you can more efficiently use fat, there's actually changes that occur in cell membranes, there's changes that occur in your gut microbiome, and you teach your body how to use fat more efficiently. When you're not training like before, you can spare muscle as a fuel source and you can more efficiently use fat. So it can help you get shredded, but that obviously has to, be combined with, you have to be at a caloric deficit. You have to be at a net negative energy balance, burning more calories than you're consuming, so that you can then lose fat. So it's a great way to isolate fat loss and maintain lean muscle mass, which is beautiful.
So, so would you say like for guys, I mean, when I, from everything that you just said, what I took is guys that finish the season a bit heavy. I know a lot of guys, there's two different types of guys. Some guys go into the season at like 200 and finish the season at like 180, because
Mhm.
of all the games and how much they play and everything. And I
Yeah.
also know guys that start the season at like 180 and finish at like 190 because of all the exercise, they're eating way more,
Yeah,
So
it really is gonna depend because
there's two different types of guys. And I think from what I took from what you said is the guys that finish a bit overweight, they should definitely try the keto diet for the first 2-3 weeks
yeah,
off the season while they're taking a break.
what they should do, yeah, so they should do, it doesn't have to be keto. It can be keto. It should be a low carb diet, in my opinion, and they could also implement intermittent fasting. The combination of the two would be
Yes.
pretty ideal because now fasting. I just want to preface this by saying that fasting is not a joke. It's very real. In fact, the New England Journal of Medicine, the top medical journal in the world, just did a whole review on fasting, December 2019, on its effects on health, disease prevention, and longevity. There's studies on fasting done on athletes. I only have one video on YouTube. Um, it's actually called "How to Maintain Muscle Mass During a Prolonged Training Break." I recommend every person tuning into this watch that video. Not for my own personal, I don't get paid for it. I think that it's going to be extremely beneficial for athletes and anyone that's trying to make the most, or trying to maintain as much muscle as possible while they're taking a training. I did it, for COVID, but it's applicable for any kind of training break.
Right.
Um, and the second half of that video actually goes into fasting. And I review all the studies, all the research. I make it easy to understand and practical to apply. And the reason why I recommend implementing a fasting protocol and a low carb protocol is because, again, you're teaching your body to more efficiently run off of fat as a fuel source. And that means that you spare muscle. You tell your muscle, hey, I don't really need you for energy, because muscle can be turned into sugar and used as a fuel source very easily, and you bye-bye, your muscle's gone. But with intermittent fasting, and with low carb diet, you can teach your body to run off of fat more efficiently.
And for those, wait, sorry, real quick, I just want to interrupt you. Sorry about that. For those tuning in that are thinking like fasting, dude, like I'm not gonna fast. Like I do intermittent fasting, and this is something that's helped me a ton, especially with the late night snacking. But I do intermittent fasting 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. and 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. window means like I eat from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. So most of my fasting window, I'm literally sleeping. Like if I'm in bed by 10
Yeah, no,
p.m.,
it's you're
literally
gonna be sleeping for most of it.
and I wake up at 8 a.m. I got 2 hours. I'm drinking ice water. I can drink black coffee to keep my fast. So literally, like most of the time you're sleeping and the benefits are scientifically backed.
Yeah, so this is what I will say is that this is probably gonna be best while you're in the off season. Like when you're in the season and when you're in it and training way more and you have the games and whatnot and the competition, maybe not the best idea. But when you're taking any kind of break, I think it's a great protocol. I would recommend doing 14 to 16 hours of fasting that includes sleep. So for example, eating between 12 p.m. and 8 p.m. It's 8 hours it's an 8-hour feeding window, 16-hour fasting window. And what happens essentially is after 10 to 14 hours without food, you deplete what's called liver glycogen. So in your liver, there's this stored carbohydrate source. And after 10 to 14 hours without eating, you deplete it. And then your body goes, hey, let's start breaking down some of our stored body fat and using it as a fuel source. And that fuel source is ketones. Your body uses it as a secondary fuel source. You know how I said before that the most efficient source is glucose. Now you're running off ketones. And that's called, in science, it's called intermittent metabolic switching. When you switch from glucose as the primary fuel source to ketones as the primary fuel source, that switch is very beneficial for your physiology because it's something that throughout all of human evolution was a thing, right? We were hunter gatherers and we had to go out and look for food for hours out of the day, and we finally had a meal. And so we would constantly switch between those metabolites. And I don't want to go too far into the intermittent fasting, but basically it helps you improve things like metabolic flexibility. You can more efficiently use fat when you need to use fat. You can more efficiently use carbs when you need to use carbs. And then all of this, that switching between metabolites elicits all kinds of benefits everywhere from, disease prevention and stress management, all the way to literally increasing what's called CREB and BDNF, which are, these molecules essentially that are expressed in your brain and can improve neuroplasticity and synaptogenesis and neurogenesis and
Focus.
sharpening and focus. Like, it's very beneficial for you, and it's not magic. It's just intermittent fasting is a lifestyle. It's very consistent with evolution. That's why it works so well. And it can be beneficial for you when you're taking a training break. Not the best thing if you're, in the season.
All right. So here now, what I want to get into is like more. Well, we've been athlete specific, but I want to get into the pregame meals and the postgame meals. So now, just so you can be familiar with a typical hockey pregame meal, it's pretty much pasta, Alfredo sauce, and chicken. And if you don't agree with me and you're a hockey player listening, at me, okay? And so basically pasta and chicken, I think it's pretty much like, the go-to. When I was playing in the QMJHL, our meals, we would all eat together at the restaurant. We were on the road. It was always like, we wouldn't order the meals. The coaches had that ordered. It was literally the same pasta for every single guy, right? And we eat around 3 hours and a half to 4 hours before the game. And we eat all those carbs. Now, also I want to talk about post-game, because post-game is probably the most dangerous thing, I'd say, when it comes to hockey, because even at the highest levels that I've played at, there's always been like pizza post game pretty much every time. Pizza's a very big post game thing. I don't know. Can you like get into this stuff? Like,
So what I will say is that, sports nutrition is a huge, of all the topics we've discussed, is definitely the biggest one. And so I think that we should leave the bulk of this for another show, another podcast.
Absolutely.
Let's do that. But I can quickly do a bit of a review. You want to match your carbohydrate intake to your activity level. That's one major theme, is like the more active you are, the more carbohydrate you want to consume.
Oh, sorry. Let me interrupt you real quick.
Yeah.
So this kind of goes to what kind of player are you on? Like, there's first liners that play 20 minutes a night. There's fourth liners that play 5 minutes a night. So
that's what I was actually going to get into that. Like the nutrition isn't just specific to the sport, but specific to the player. And the sports nutrition, dude, we can go so far in depth and get so specific.
Broaden it up. We'll do this though. We'll do this.
Yeah, I'll make it very, very broad. Carbohydrate intake will vary per player. Protein intake will vary per player. How processed, or the glycemic index, the glycemic variability of carbohydrate will be different per player, and for timing as well. Like how much time you have before a game, given how much time you have, you can choose different kinds of carbohydrate depending on their glycemic variability or how quickly they're absorbed or the effect they have on your blood sugar. Again, that depends on the activity. So there's so many things you have to look at. And I really that I'm very passionate about this, and like I'll go at it. I honestly want to leave this for another show, because if you get me started, I won't be able to stop, and I don't have time right now.
Okay, absolutely. But one more thing I wanted to ask actually before we close this off is, I see you drinking a glass of wine almost every night. You say that's healthy. So how many glasses of wine until it gets unhealthy?
So for men, it should be no more than 2 glasses. For women, it should be no more than 1 glass. And by 1 glass, I mean like one, like not like a full glass, like a
Yeah.
standard serving of wine. Um, Wine is awesome because everyone, I'm sure athletes want to limit their alcohol intake and whatnot, but a little bit of alcohol, just a moderate amount, like up to 2 glasses a night, can actually benefit some of the enzymes in your liver that are involved in detoxification processes and whatnot. It can actually be beneficial, and also being able to moderate that intake just from a psychological perspective, having that kind of moderation with yourself is also very beneficial for other aspects of your life. But what's cool about red wine is that it's super rich in two awesome things, two really really healthy things. It's very rich in polyphenols, which are antioxidants, which can help you with recovery and just with health in general. And then also in resveratrol, which is a molecule that slows aging at the cellular level. It slows what's called the shortening of telomeres, which is how your cells age, like how you age at the cellular level. It slows that process. So it's very beneficial for longevity. And it's actually so beneficial that there's been studies done on what are called the blue zones of the world, which are areas of the world that have very high concentrations of individuals living beyond 100 years old. And they find that most of these blue zones are actually in places like Italy and France and other areas where red wine consumption happens to be very high. And so, you can argue, oh, but correlation isn't causation. That's something that we say in science. It's like just because they're correlated doesn't mean that one causes the other. But they've actually done the research and looked at the science of it and studied resveratrol, and they find that literally red wine is one of the reasons why these people are living longer and why they're aging more slowly and why they feel better. But the best way to drink red wine is not just the red wine itself, but also the social aspect. Like these people drink red wine in the middle of the day and at night. But when they do that, they're always around other people. And when they're eating foods, it's usually whole, natural, healthy food with other people. So the social aspect is huge, not just the quality of the food or the ingredients. So,
Wow. That's
so yeah,
awesome
that's
stuff,
bro.
bro.
We can save the nutrition stuff. Like I also want to leave a bit of a cliffhanger for the people tuning in. I
Yeah,
think it's a great topic for the next show.
definitely, definitely. So, Andres, this was a huge pod. I've learned a shit ton from it. I'm going to be visualizing tonight while I'm drinking my wine, while my phone's on airplane mode. I'm fired up, dude. Literally, I learned so much from this podcast, and I know everyone tuning in will as well. So, thanks so much, bro. And I'll definitely have you on again, and
Bro,
we'll get.
such a pleasure, man. Seriously, this is awesome. Such a great time.
All right, beautiful. You got to pause the recording, I think. Or can
Yeah,
I?
yeah, yeah.
All right, that was perfect, though, bro. That was
Bro, that
awesome.
was nuts, dude.
Awesome stuff, man.
That was
Awesome.
actually crazy.